In the aftermath of the Oscars, two things became pointedly clear as the biggest talking points of the night. Bong Joon-Ho being a total boss, and Joaquin Phoenix crying about the treatment of cows. To quote Joaquin Phoenix, "We feel entitled to artificially inseminate a cow, and when she gives birth, we steal her baby, even though her cries of anguish are unmistakable. Then we take her milk that's intended for her calf, and we put it in our coffee and our cereal." Now, people are still talking about everything that happened at the Oscars, and so I, as a keen YouTuber, started to think, how can I combine those two things, Joaquin Phoenix's veganism and Bong Joon-Ho being awesome, into one video? And then I remembered that Bong Joon-Ho made a movie in 2017 that made him go vegan for a couple of months because of how disturbing it was to research it. That film, my friends, is Okja, the Netflix original film that you can stream right now if you want to. And I don't know how well this is going to cut in the beginning, but there are spoilers all over this video. So if you haven't seen Okja, please go on Netflix, watch it, and come right back and watch the rest of this video. Okja is a multinational film that features a cast that comes from all over the world, and the premise is fairly straightforward. A multinational corporation has decided that they are going to solve the hunger crisis by creating a genetically modified super pig that produces less waste, eats less food in order to get to its big size, and can essentially be used as the main meat component of an omnivorous diet. A young girl named Mija becomes attached to one of those super pigs, affectionately known as Okja, and the central conflict of the film revolves around her trying to get Okja back from that multinational corporation when they show up to reclaim her. Meanwhile, an animal rights activist group called the Animal Liberation Front attempts to help Mija in her quest, although with some dubious means. After being taken, Okja travels from the mountains of South Korea to the streets of New York, of Manhattan, and along the way makes a stop at a New Jersey laboratory where she is forcefully impregnated, raped would be another way of putting it, and she also has her flesh extracted for a taste test, which is as gruesome as it sounds. After a botched rescue attempt, Okja is then successfully saved right at the last minute at a slaughterhouse as Mija trades a golden pig that her father gave her, or rather her grandfather gave her, to Tilda Swinton for Okja's life. They are then allowed to leave the slaughterhouse and go back to the mountains in South Korea. So obviously this film has a lot to do with animal rights and how humanity treats animals that we eat. And I want to first talk a little bit about veganism in general, what it is, what it entails, and then look at the characteristics, the personality that is constructed for Okja in order for us to empathize with her and to side with her throughout all of this. And then finally take a look at the ending and how perhaps the overall vegan message, if there is one, is complicated by how the film ends. So first, let's define veganism in general. Quoting the Vegan Society, it is defined as a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as it is possible and practical, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And based on that definition, I think it's pretty easy to see how Okja can be seen as a vegan film. Okja is an animal who is going to be exploited. And once again, the central conflict in this film is Mija attempting to get Okja back so Okja cannot be exploited. The multinational corporation wants to use Okja for food, to feed people, whereas Mija just wants her friend back and wants to save her friend from being cut up into tiny pieces and for being used to make ribs and hot dogs and other things like that. In the film, we also get the Animal Liberation Front, or the AFL as I will refer to them, and they are a clear vegan activist group. Their sole purpose is to free animals. They talk about their goals throughout the film and often act in those interests, although occasionally going outside of those lines when it comes to actually completing their goals. However, this is not necessarily enough. In order to get people to see the cruelty that is happening to Okja, there had to be more done. In this case, giving her a personality, building one out, creating her as a functional, breathing character who you could point at and say, these are the characteristics of Okja. And this naturally had to be done because if we were just dealing with a pig as we see them in everyday life and as we know them, then I feel like the audience would have a much harder time connecting with the struggle of Mija trying to get Okja back, because in a lot of people's minds, Pigs are just food and are not really afforded any other kind of status in our society. So now let's look at how they actually made Okja into a living, breathing character with her own personality. And the big moment for doing this was in the introduction, in Okja's introduction to all of us, to the audience. Okja is shown first as being trustful towards Mija. She comes to Mija when she has the proverbial thorn in her foot, and Mija is able to pull it off of her foot. Then we get moments of playfulness where Okja is playing in the water and actually responds to Mija when Mija asks her to jump into a pond to get the fish out of it, so Mija and her grandfather can eat the fish later for dinner. More than that though, we get a very specific moment where we are shown that Okja is intelligent, that she possesses problem-solving skills. Mija has gotten too close to the edge of a cliff and has fallen off, and she grabs a rope which Okja has put her foot down on, thus preventing Mija from falling. Okja then takes the rope and runs towards a tree stump, wrapping the rope around it and flinging Mija back up. But Okja has now fallen off of the cliff, essentially sacrificing herself, not knowing that what this action did to save Mija, she didn't know if she would actually survive this. It was a self-sacrifice on Okja's part. Now Okja survives this fall, and later on when the pair get back to the grandfather's house on top of the mountain, they go to sleep. And Mija sleeps beside Okja. And here we actually see a bit of a maternal instinct from Okja, where she positions herself in such a way that she won't roll over and crush Mija, and actually attempts to keep her warm throughout the night. So Okja is not just a pig, she is a sentient, compassionate animal who has intelligence and who can problem solve. And just based on these little characteristics being added, it makes it so much easier for the audience to empathize with her because they can see themselves in Okja's shoes much more easily. The barrier between human and animal, and let's be real, humans are animals, is diminished, and both sides are brought closer together by Okja's characterization. So when Okja is taken to the facility in New Jersey and is raped, we are able to understand it as such. We don't see it as some natural thing that happens out in the wild. We know that this is an assault just based on the way that Okja reacts to it. The squeals and the screaming that she lets out while the whole thing is happening. We are then also able to understand that as Okja is being led up the ramp at the slaughterhouse in the film's finale, that she is not doing this because she wants to die. She's doing it because she is being forced to die, that she's being electrically prodded up the ramp towards an untimely demise. And we know all of this because of how Okja is characterized in the early part of the film. We empathize with her because of the way that she's been characterized, and that's what makes a lot of what happens in the last part of the film so emotionally moving. So now that we understand how Okja was characterized, let's now look at the ending and how it relates to the overarching vegan themes of the film. It's strange. It doesn't quite work, and it actually is kind of depressing from this perspective at first. At the end of the film, Mija finally catches up to Okja in the slaughterhouse and is able to stop her death just before the air bullet is going to go into her skull and kill her. Mija is able to do this by bartering for Okja's life, essentially giving a whole hunk of gold to Tilda Swinton's evil twin, and Tilda Swinton says, yeah, okay, you can pay for Okja with this gold. I'm fine with that. So in a very conventional sense, the ending of the film should be seen as a happy one. Mija, Okja, and a little baby that they were able to rescue from the slaughterhouse go back to the top of the mountain. They reunite with the grandfather. They're all sitting down for a happy meal that they've always enjoyed, and that's basically the film, except that the slaughterhouse still exists. And as they were walking away, we kept hearing the repeated shots of the air gun, which was troubling, to say the least. And at that point, all of the AFL members had also been beaten up and arrested. Beyond all that, we also have this depressing note from evil Tilda Swinton saying that people will buy anything as long as it's cheap, especially when it comes to meat. So we're left with this overall feeling that nothing is going to change, and in fact, things have gotten worse. However, it's in evil Tilda Swinton's words that we can find a very plausible way to actually make headway when it comes to this issue. The barter that happens for Okja's life is really indicative of how capitalism just works. Those companies that need us to buy their products in order to sustain those companies will cease to function if we just stop buying their products. So the actions that the company takes, in this case, murdering and slaughtering innocent and sentient beings, would stop if we just stopped eating that meat and stopped buying that meat. And the way that Bong Joon-ho presents the transaction, it's almost as though it's exceedingly practical. It's actually not that difficult to comprehend. If you don't give money to them, they won't make it. As consumers, we have that choice, and it's laid fairly bare for us at the end of this film. So if you've watched Okja and you feel like you want to make a difference and you want to, in some way, improve the lives of animals and to end animal suffering as we know it on this planet, then I think just take the lead that the film gives you and buy less or buy none. Because that way you are no longer contributing to what is shown in this film as being an amoral industry. And as you can probably tell, a little bit of my own personal bias is getting into this video. I do live a vegan lifestyle, and I was very sad while watching this film. A lot of the things that happen in the film, especially when the two super pig parents push their child outside of the fence in the hopes that it can be rescued. And then as Okja and Mija are walking away from the slaughterhouse, you have the two parents following behind as if they want to just get one last look at their child before being led literally to the slaughter. That is a moment that I won't forget as far as images that have emotionally impacted me. It's not often, in fact, I never cry in films, but that moment got me really, really close. So that's about all I wanted to say about Okja, at least insofar as how it pertains to veganism and having that be a theme that goes throughout the entire film. I would love to know what you think about the film and what I've talked about here in the comments below. It's okay if you're vegan or not vegan, just let me know your thoughts. Obviously, I would love for you to see the film before commenting. It's on Netflix, as I've mentioned a few times. It's a very good film. I suggest you watch it. It's from Bong Joon-ho. It's from our boy, and everyone loves him. So yeah, I would just love for you to get in the comments. Let me know what you think about everything I've talked about. Please like this video if you want to see more content like this, and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do those things, because that's how this channel stays alive and how it continues to grow, and that's exactly what we want. So until the next one, cheers.